If you're interested in connecting with people and nature, a career with the national parks might be the adventure you've been looking for. Today, we're chatting with Dave Fenlon, the education lead at Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. With a background in biology and a wealth of experiences from the Peace Corps, Dave offers unique insights into the world of park rangers. Join us as we uncover the diverse roles, daily challenges, and rewarding moments that come with helping to preserve our precious national parks for future generations. This is Career Chats with Katie and Robin.
Welcome, Dave. We're so excited to have you on Career Chats today.
Thanks for having me.
To begin, why don't you tell us what you do and then give us a typical day example of what on the job looks like for you?
So I'm the current education lead here at Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. A typical day can vary a lot, and I would say that it's mostly an office job at this point, but it's not entirely so. There's a lot of field trips that we do throughout the year. So the education lead arranges those, communicates with teachers, comes up with new programming ideas, depending on the time of year. Obviously, the busy seasons during the school year for education field trips. So the summers, this position pivots more to just helping with the busy summer activities and all the events and stuff going on. There's a lot of random kind of collateral duties that come on with that, but mostly it's working with teachers to arrange field trips.
Awesome. So how did you find yourself in this job?
So I went to school for biology. I took college at Michigan Tech, Michigan Technological University, and then went on to a master's in biology after I did an internship with the Park Service in Arizona. I still wasn't, clear where that path was going to take me. That internship was more on the natural resource side of things. So going out and off trail in these parks in Arizona and parts of New Mexico, West Texas, and doing field work, identifying plants, using GPS to flag where rare plants are located. And then a team would come out to those exact same spots in a few years, 5 years or so, and see how things were changing. Anyway, so very different kind of position within the National Park Service. And then the master's degree also in biology, but it was this kind of combo Peace Corps master's thing. So that took about 5 years, start to finish. I was in the Peace Corps for a few years, assigned as a coastal resource management volunteer, which is essentially sort of like a DNR officer / park ranger. I was assigned to the Philippines, working on a marine reserve that had a beautiful marine reserve called the Sagay Marine Reserve, and had all these mangroves and coral reefs. So you can imagine being sort of like a park ranger, conservation officer, but half the job there was kind of being a community organizer, because there were some 5,000 fishermen and their families living within the marine reserve. So trying to encourage kind of safe fishing practices or low impact fishing practices, because given sort of the desperation of some of the families, they sometimes would use like improvised explosives to try to go fishing, like throwing little fertilizer bombs onto the reef, and then the fish float up to the surface.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine that's not a great practice to have, things like that, and steering them toward alternative income sources, things like farming seaweed. That actually became my master's project. Got that master's, worked some random jobs as a substitute teacher, as a barista for a while there, and finally got a foot in here. I was applying to National Park Service jobs the whole time, and managed to get an interview and got in here back in 2020 as a education technician is what that role is. So sort of a member of the education team. And then a position opened for the lead last year, and managed to get it. So
wow.
Were you hoping to be in the education department of being a ranger?
I was not exclusively applying to them. With government jobs, everybody has to go through the usajobs.gov website to apply. They can't just pick somebody out that they like. It has to be fair. Cast your net far and wide. Don't be picky on where you go. There's now up to 428, I believe, national park units around the country. A lot of them are tiny, national monuments and things like that. So don't get too focused on getting into Yellowstone National Park, for example. So I tried, I was applying with my background, I was qualified for natural resource kind of jobs with the biology degree, with that internship, like I mentioned, kind of working with plants and water, what we would call spring assessments, going to these desert canyons and testing the water and analyzing what life was there. So those positions, and then also saw these education technician positions. Wasn't really sure what it all entailed. It sounded pretty good to me in some ways. I had done some teaching. I was like a teaching assistant, a TA in college. And like I said, had been substitute teaching. Really liked being in a classroom environment and that role. So I was trying for those. And that's the first interview I got actually was here at Sleeping Bear Dunes. I grew up, I don't think I said that, grew up in Traverse City or near Traverse City, which is like within half an hour of the park. I was really like a 15-minute drive from the park. So I'd been coming here my whole life. My mom was thrilled to have me. And my brother and sister, my siblings, live within a half hour here too. So it all worked out pretty well.
Wow.
Kind of an unusual story, I'd say. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up that it's that easy. Like I kind of, try not to take it for granted that it worked out that way. Very easily been the more traditional path is you work wherever you can as a seasonal employee, maximum 6 months at a time, and then just have to keep applying. It's a bit of a misconception that people ask me all the time, where's your next assignment? As if it's like a military deployment. It's not like you got to apply every time. It's a job just like any other. And the vast majority are these seasonal positions at 6 months. But my position is a term, which is, again, pretty lucky, I would say, to start as a year-round employee, as a term employee. But the term part means you're not permanent. It's capped at 4 years. Just like a political term, sort of. So every year you can get renewed based on available funding, performance. But I managed to get almost the whole 4 years, but I was facing that deadline. I was about 8 months away from having to move on before that I got that other position. So now my current role is a permanent position, which is sort of the, people kind of try to compare it to tenure at a university. I don't know if it's quite that, a perfect metaphor, but it's similar. That just basically you don't have an end date anymore. And, you can kind of throw down some roots, move around if you want. You can do details and in different parks is what they call that, like position, temporary position somewhere else. But you're essentially could stay in this career, in this position till you retire. So
you mentioned all your schooling and that you've done, but what is actually required and necessary to qualify to become a park ranger?
The short version would be that it's a pretty wide range of backgrounds you can have, that you don't even necessarily need a college degree, although it's been pretty rare for me to encounter anybody that doesn't have a college degree that's working for the Park Service. You would need to really justify it by having a background working in a similar field already for a time. Kind of an unwritten requirement, I guess, for college degrees. It's just so that competitive that it'd be hard to get that experience, a similar experience, without already having a college degree. So anyways, setting that aside, you don't need a biology background like mine. I've met folks that came from more of a history kind of background, because a lot of our parks are historical in nature. My supervisor for the last few years, who's now a coworker of mine, had a journalism background. So it can be pretty far and wide, depending on the division. So you mentioned that not all of them are rangers. We call everybody that works at the park a ranger, and unless they're working in administration, sort of the business services side of things, then they're still wearing the uniform. It's a little confusing that people will see me out in the field if I am out, and they'll assume that I'm a law enforcement ranger because I'm in the uniform. I got the badge and a radio, but we all just are. It's part of the Park Service, job is wearing the uniform. Really, if you're going out into where somebody from the public might see you.
Okay.
Even though we look the same, there's the education division, interpretation, which is kind of the other side of our office. Interpretation, not meaning language interpretation. It's interpreting the park's resources, and the history, biodiversity, all that. So that's basically everything we do in our office outside of a formal education experience. That's our interpretation. So I should have started there really. I'm the education lead, but / interpretive park ranger, because everybody in our office is participating in the big star parties and, maple sugaring days and all these big events. And certainly over the summer, everything we're doing, that's the interpretation side of things. And then we have our natural resource rangers working with the plants and animals. Maintenance is a huge division of the park. And that's people that are coming from a background that's more, they're mechanics, heavy machinery operators, drivers, so it's a that's a whole nother, that's probably usually one of the biggest divisions of a park, really, is they're taking care of the roads and the trails, the plowing, janitorial services. That's a huge part of park operations. Concessions and fees. That's another whole division of being the ones usually in the visitor centers or the booths out in the park, handing out passes, collecting fees. The business services I mentioned briefly, they're doing all the kind of internal affairs of human resources, payroll, handling permits for companies that want to work with the parks and things like that. I feel like I'm missing one. I mean, there's a lot of divisions, and all the parks have them, even if they're not necessarily a big park. Like we're kind of a medium-sized park, Sleeping Bear Dunes, or something like Yellowstone or Denali. Obviously, has a huge natural resources side of things, but even the smaller ones will have those different divisions. So, a long-winded answer. But you can really, a lot of different backgrounds can find their way into the National Park Service.
I did not realize that most people are going to be called ranger.
Oh, I think the one that I forgot really primarily is what we call Visitor and Resource Protection, VRP, which is our law enforcement rangers. So those are the classic, the ones that you think of when you think of a park, or most people think of when they think of a park ranger. They're the ones that are, helping people that get lost or injured, enforcing laws, regulations.
Okay.
So for you personally, what is your favorite part about your job? And we always have to ask your least favorite part. Why don't we start with the least so we can end on a high note?
I like that. All right, bad news first. I guess it would have to be, I'm going to be a little careful with my answer. But I want to be honest. Probably something that every job has when you kind of climb the ladder enough, there's a lot of paperwork involved, and there's hiring. Right, so we go down to about 50 staff or so in the winter. And then in the summer, we add 100 people, we go up to about 150 employees over the summer. So every year there's hiring. And I do most of my hiring is in the winter, so I'm a little different from most of the positions in the park for the education side of things. But anyway, that comes with a lot of paper pushing, and that is not the most fun. Filling out paperwork, and kind of working with human resources to get people hired. There's always delays and, kind of a lot of back and forth, emails. So not the most thrilling side of the job, but necessary, of course. There's no way around that.
And now we get the good news.
This is an easy answer for me. It's got to be, working with the kids, working with youth, and kind of being a part of that, just the whole effort around conservation, raising good stewards. It's the same thing that teachers are doing in the schools, like raising responsible youth that care about the environment, care about protecting our national park sites. So that's got to be, my first and foremost answer. There's other things I like about the job, of course, but just being able to be there. I don't get to do it as often as I'd like, but I still do, even in this new role, get to see that kind of aha moment with the kids where they learn something. You can almost see it in real time that they just really get a deeper appreciation for the park. A lot of our students we work with are local students within about 50 miles, not all of them, but most of them. And so you can just really see them almost take ownership of the park in some small way, that they're like, I didn't know that. And now I love Sleeping Bear Dunes that much more. So yeah, that's been my favorite.
That's awesome.
And for people listening that don't know about like the online education that National Park Services do, my family has done so many different parks online, and then we go visit them. And it's such a cool lead up before your trip or vacation, because then when your kids get there, it's like, oh, whoa, we just learned about this. And then they love going to the bookshop and like finding a book to then further it. I love everything you guys do. So I'm a fan.
Oh, thank you.
So you mentioned a bunch of different types of backgrounds are great for multiple roles in the Park Service. But is there any commonality between personalities that you see, or what type of personalities do you think would thrive in the day-to-day work environment with the National Park Service?
Great question. Again, it'll vary a bit depending on the division. Maintenance workers might not interact with the public as much, although they're often the ones that people will approach to try to ask questions, but they got a different job to do, I'll say. But anyway, I would say this something that's kind of a public service sort of ethos helps a lot, or that sort of a mindset, because you are working, it's a federal land, it's everybody owns it, is the idea there. So you really are a public servant in a lot of ways, not just on paper. Like you're interacting with people, helping people. So being personable and willing to help, and patient often sometimes, and knowing those de-escalation techniques when somebody is upset, you're the face of the park, and they might be, not that happens a lot, but having that sort of skill set can help a lot. And just that, again, mindset really of that you are a public servant, that these lands, are for everyone to enjoy, and just how can you help bridge the gap between the government managing the land and the visitor, so that they become a part, that protection of the park, stewardship of the park.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you tell someone who's thinking about entering the field?
Be patient, I guess. If they're trying to enter the field, it can be, frankly, it can be pretty discouraging, because USA Jobs is the one website where these jobs are posted. And sometimes they're only posted for a week, or they'll be capped at like the first 50 or 100 applicants or something.
Oh, wow.
My case was kind of an exception to that rule, but just not getting set on one park. Like, I really want to work in this park, because a lot of other people are thinking that same thing. And, if it's your very first job, it can be hard to get that interview, in the National Park Service. Once you do get a job, even a seasonal position, it becomes much easier to get another job within the Park Service. To have that on your resume, okay, they already have worn the green and gray, as we say, the uniform, and they know, it'll be much easier to train them and get them in their job. So that first kind of foot in the door, it can be a challenge and can be frustrating for folks. Something that can really help is an internship. I know that's true for a lot of careers. Thankfully, I don't want to speak for all the internships in the Park Service, but there have meal stipends associated with them, $40 a day for our interns, 7 days a week. So thankfully, again, speaking just from our park, they don't have to be an unpaid internship. I know that can be a real barrier for folks that are coming from, kind of don't have that ability to just work for free for a summer, So that's, I would highly recommend. That's something I always stress to high schoolers that ask me about it, or, when we do occasionally have college students visiting and chatting about working for the National Park Service. Sign up for an internship. Don't be picky on where you go, too, because you can get an internship like I did in Arizona, and that still translates pretty well for like showing that you're committed to wanting to work for the National Park Service, and just gives you a big leg up to getting that interview.
Great advice. So do you think there will be more or less opportunities for people to do this work in the future?
I'm going to say more. They're adding more park units each year, national monuments, and things like that. I don't see that shrinking necessarily, barring some unforeseen like major change. I think the national parks as a whole is a pretty stable career to look forward to. If you're currently a student, and you won't be in the job market for a while, I think it's still something that's, not going anywhere anytime soon. And I would say even, gradually expanding.
Is there anything else that, any other pearls of wisdom you'd like people to know?
It's a lot more diverse than you'd think as far as jobs within a national park unit. And, if you're into parks at all, and whether you're a history buff or an outdoors enthusiast, recreation enthusiast, some parks have park rangers where they're climbing rangers. They're literally just going out rock climbing and interacting with visitors, or kayaking, whitewater rapids. Not here at this park, of course, but there are parks. There's all sorts of jobs. So if you're at all interested in any of those kinds of career paths, the National Park Service, I think, could be for you.
Dave, thank you so much for being here today. This was so great, and we know that our listeners will appreciate it as much as we did.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it too.
Career Chats is hosted by Katie Huddleston and Robin Coney. Show notes and guest info can be found on our website, careerchats.show. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love you to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, stay curious.